Welcome to You Rise Me Up, a podcast about Asian Europeans from all walks of life. I'm your host, Ching, a German-born Chinese. Today with me, Mai Anh Nguyen, Director of Rooms at Mandarin Oriental. Born in Germany to Vietnamese parents, Mai Anh grew up in Prague and studied in Switzerland. Her career at one of the world's finest hotels has taken her across the world, from Prague to Bangkok, Hong Kong, Munich, Kuala Lumpur, and now Dubai. Thank you very much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, Mai Anh, you were born in Germany, but then you grew up in Prague. What is actually your family story? Like, how come you were born in Germany and why did they then settle in Prague instead of Germany, for example?
When my dad was 18 years old, my grandfather, he died in a war. Because of that, he could go abroad and study. And he went to Czechoslovakia at that time because there was an agreement between Czechoslovakia and Vietnam. So they sent young people to study, and then my dad actually stayed and work. And 7 years later, my mom flew in as well, and she was from a better family from the city, so she could go abroad to study. And she ended up being in Prague in Czechoslovakia as well. And that's how my parents met in Prague. But later on, when they were young, they heard actually that in Germany there's better benefits and all that. So they actually emigrated to Germany. That's where my sister and we were born. So we have lived there for 5 years. However, then after Czechoslovakia became a democracy, it was a Czech Republic. So my dad heard that doing business in Czech Republic was much better. So actually, they decided to move back to Prague. Looking back, I'm really grateful where I grew up and where I was raised because there's a difference between Vietnamese people living in Czech Republic. They are more, business people, entrepreneurs on their own. However, in Germany, actually, people tend to work for someone else. And the Vietnamese community is also larger in the Czech Republic, and they're more together as well. So, for example, my Vietnamese language is pretty good, definitely better than my peers who were born and raised in Germany. Most of them, they actually cannot speak Vietnamese.
Very interesting. I didn't know that the Vietnamese community in Prague was even bigger than the one in Germany.
I'm not sure if it's bigger, but in Germany, people are actually spread out. So the community is not as strong. Whereas in Prague, they're very much together. A lot of people know each other as well.
So better connected, basically, right?
Yes, 100%.
I see. Yeah, because when I moved to Berlin, I just noticed that there's a huge Vietnamese community and like loads of Vietnamese restaurants as well. Where in Germany did you live, by the way?
In Bad Harzburg, it's a town close to Hanover.
And do you still have any impressions from your time in Germany or from the move?
So it's kind of blurry. But there were certain moments that I remember when we actually wanted to escape back to Prague. We had to actually walk through a forest. Don't ask me why and all these details. But my parents said, okay, you have to be quiet. So my dad was holding my younger sister and my mom was holding my hands. But I think that the entire whole experience made it so vivid that I can still remember how we were actually walking through the borders.
Wow. And like, since you mentioned that your grandfather passed away in the war, do you ever talk to your parents about that experience?
Not really, but there was one moment. I still remember we were driving in a car and my dad was talking about that. And when you actually know that your dad grew up with our father, because he passed away when my dad was 6 years old, you kind of knew that he didn't have a dad. So I remember that actually I started crying when my dad was telling me. And I felt really sorry for my dad that he actually was growing without the father. But I still remember my dad's answer because he doesn't know the difference, how it is to have a father, and he was too small, so he basically grew up with only his mom. But I think it really reflects a lot on my dad in a way that he wanted to be the strong man. So he would make sure that my mom would not work, she would be home taking care of my sister and he would be the breadwinner of the family, working really hard, like 7 days a week, of course, and doing different kind of work or manual work. That's how he started basically in Germany and in Czechoslovakia at the time, like in the factories as well. And then he started to be more open on making his own business, like importing goods, firstly from Poland and then from China. So he would be gone for a few months. I would be home with my mom and my sister. Yes, I do remember certain moments like that.
Since you mentioned that you very much grew up with the Vietnamese culture around you and your Vietnamese is quite good as well, how do you relate to the Vietnamese culture in general?
So my parents are both Vietnamese, and I must say my dad is very strict, very traditional in a way that you have to have good grades at school, then you have to have a good career, save money to buy a house, buy a car. And I think it's very similar to all Asians who actually immigrated. They have to work much harder than the others to actually save up, send the money back home, and build the entire home outside of their countries as well. So it was the same for my dad. And of course, you cannot date until you complete your university. So I would have to actually hide my boyfriend. And we do not have a son in the family. So, as you know, in Vietnam, there's a certain desire to have a son in order to continue that family tree, because then the son would take care of the parents once the parents would get older and they would actually live with the son, right? But I'm the oldest in the family and I have a younger sister. So I think the way how my parents raised me and my sister was you need to have a good degree in order to have a good paid job. So very traditional perception of success after school. You constantly chase for the future, and Asian parents, or at least my parents, would not teach me how to be happy and being satisfied with what you currently have. Of course, they would be very humble people and generous. I still remember when I was small, again, driving, I think, to one of the places. And my dad was like, you do good for people, but never expect anything in return. Just do good because you want to do good. And if they do return it back to you, that's good, but never expect that. So that's how I was raised. But, in general, I feel our generation, we were not raised based on how to be happy, because I believe, happiness is all in your mindset. You need to be grateful for what you have, and then you can always find that happiness.
Do you feel like because there is no son in your family that there was extra pressure being put on you as the eldest daughter to like perform?
Yes, I think so. When I was growing up, I didn't realize that up until now when I look back. I'm right now 32 years old and I end up having this position and on our executive committee, which is kind of the most senior leaders in our hotel. We are 12 members, among which 3 are women, including myself. The other 2 are most senior in terms of their age, and then it's me. So it's 3 ladies against the rest of them are male leaders. And majority are actually over 40 years old and older as well.
Speaking of which, Mai, I mean, you've had a really impressive career in hospitality, but why did you decide to go into hospitality in the first place? And how would you describe your career up until now in your own words? Because it must have come with its own challenges.
So it was really by chance that I ended up being in hospitality. During my bachelor studies in Prague, you had to do a mandatory internship. And I really had kind of no clue. So I went to talk to the dean. I was like, okay, I need to do an internship. Would you give me some advice? And he just casually mentioned, oh, actually, would you be interested in doing working in a luxury hotel? Maybe in sales and marketing. He was a friend of a general manager back then. So he scheduled an interview. I got the role, non-paid internship. And I very much enjoyed the environment. And somehow my CV got sent to Mandarin Oriental Prague. That's how I started, actually. I started as a frontline colleague, as an agent. So I had to first persuade my parents not to send me for my master's immediately after my bachelor, to take a break to work. So I was working and I was so happy with the experience that I knew that I wanted to continue. So then I ended up doing my master's of business administration in hospitality management in Switzerland.
And then how did you go from your first role as an agent and then after your master's to the role that you have now?
So I went to study in Switzerland, and during the studies, you have companies coming to the campus to recruit new talents to work for them. So the corporate office of Mandarin Oriental, they actually realized and noticed that I used to work for Mandarin Oriental Prague, and I wanted to actually stay with the brand because I really enjoyed working there. And I wanted to go to London for some reason. When I was younger, my parents sent me to London to study English there, and I loved the big city life. So the recruiter, I remember she mentioned, unfortunately, there's no vacancy in London, but there would be an opening of so-called management and training program, but in Bangkok. Would you want to go? And I swear, at that moment, I have never been to Bangkok nor Thailand, but I did not hesitate for a second. I said, yes, why not? So I took that decision to go for the career because I wanted to do the management training. So then I moved to Bangkok. I did the program. And again, I don't know if it was me because I always try to see the good in everything. I have really enjoyed. Although the first 6 months, you're entering your honeymoon stage, everything's amazing, new, and then you're heading for a culture shock where the culture was so different. The people you work with are totally different, and the way they work, certain approach to things. So it could get quite frustrating as well because of the language barrier. But again, looking back, you learn so much.
What gave you the biggest culture shock in Thailand, and what did you learn about Thai culture in the process?
So at first, the Thai culture seems to be very friendly, very genuine, very kind. They would be always smiley. So I was very much impressed by that. But if you would like to implement a change or create something new, it would take more time than usual because the people, they would always smile and not like, yes, 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 they get it, I understand. But you would really have to give them the script to really follow just because the English was not their native language. So you would have to be really patient. Simple example, you go to any restaurant in Bangkok, you ask for water, they ask you, do you want ice or no ice? I said, no ice, and yet they would still bring you the ice. Small little things like that, but it would really frustrate me, and I would get really upset very easily at first. But somehow, I don't know what changed me. I think more time you are actually in hospitality, you learn to be more patient, and you just don't take it anymore.
And because you said you only started thinking about your cultural identity much later on, by the time you were like in Thailand, was that when you also started thinking more about your identity as well?
I mean, I knew that I'm not the same like my Vietnamese peers back in Vietnam because I never lived there. And each time, even I go to Vietnam, they don't consider me as a local because they can somehow tell from my accent or from the way how you dress, the way how you look. You're slightly different. I'm also very tall, born an Asian. So they would not consider me to be a Vietnamese. But then after some time, when you live in Asia, then you go back to where you grew up in Prague, you also realize you don't belong there because you have changed and suddenly you go back, it's not the same anymore. When I visited Prague during my holidays, or let's say after a year and a half, you realize your friends are all the same, but actually you have changed based on all the experiences. So let's say each time we go home, they would ask me, why did you move to Bangkok? Or why did you move to Hong Kong? And I'm like, what do you mean? Why? Like I go for the experiences and I love to travel. So, all these kind of questions that my friends would never understand because they only live entire life in Prague or they would go on vacation twice a year and that's it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that for sure. I had a similar experience where once I would move abroad for university, like I felt like there was both like a disconnect growing between my friends at home and me because of the new experiences I made and the way that I changed, but also with my parents, to be honest, because the things that you study, it also changes the way you think.
Yeah, no, totally. Exactly as you said. There was different stages. When I first moved, I somehow got closer to my parents because you try to keep in touch with them constantly. And I only visited home, I don't know, once or twice a year max. And I was still close to them in a way. Try to video call and text them all the time. But lately I realized I've changed somehow even more than before. That it's even harder for me right now to connect with my parents because my parents are still probably the same and they're getting old. My dad is still an overthinker. My dad is still always worried. And I think I've changed the past 3 years are more about you can't control your future. Just enjoy what you have. Enjoy being present. Don't overthink. Don't overplan. And I wasn't always like that, but I've changed in the past year. So suddenly you realize that each time I go home, I I don't connect with my parents anymore, or the energy of my parents are completely different than my energy. So we're not on the safe waveline.
What do you think has triggered that change?
I think there was one trigger. I broke up with my ex-partner back in Hong Kong. I was heartbroken, but you somehow put this into your head like, okay, 3 months, I'm going to be sad. Afterwards, no more. You need to pull yourself and move on and start a new life. And, especially when you were abroad, actually, and that experience was connected with your ex partner. Suddenly, when you break up, you end up being completely alone in a way that you've done everything all together. And when you actually thought, oh, that could be your life partner, but then everything ends. And especially when you were raised in a way that your parents taught you, when you find a partner, that's kind of like your happiness, right?
Yeah,
Because my parents, they always did everything together.
same with my parents.
But suddenly, at that moment, when that breakup happened, that I decided to break up, I wanted to prove myself that I can run 5 kilometers. So I started running. I started listening to podcasts that would help me. I was talking to my best friend all the time with Mai on the phone constantly, and she was my great support because she had been through a breakup a few months before me. So we shared something in common on a deeper level. And I had a great support group in a way that my girlfriends were there for me in Hong Kong. And this happened during the pandemic. So, restaurants and bars were closed. So you could invite a few friends over to your apartment. It was just lovely. But somehow mindset changed me that I was so open for self change. And at the same time, I was listening to a podcast and someone was saying that she was writing a gratitude journal and I got inspired. So I started a gratitude journal since September 2020. I swear, up until now, I still do every day. And it has changed my life positively. And it's even psychologically proven. I would highly recommend this to everyone. At the beginning, you sit down, you're like, oh my gosh, what should I write? So I started, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for all my friendships, I'm grateful for being healthy and alive. But then all these must points are gone. And then you start with smaller things. For example, suddenly you're just grateful for having such a sweet and juicy orange. I remember that's how I started. you know, you couldn't socialize much. And then I started that I was grateful that I had a very good night's sleep, or I was grateful I had my morning or great tea with oat milk, and I was looking forward to that. So small things that make you happy in life. So I recorded that, and now easily every time when you ask me what I'm grateful for, I can name you so many things in life every day.
Yeah, it changes your mindset.
Yeah, totally. Mindset is everything.
Yeah, I heard on the Huberman podcast actually that the two things that determine our mental health are really a sense of agency and gratitude, like just what you said.
Yes, totally. So I'm very passionate about it as well. So whoever I meet, and I always share the story of having my gratitude journal. It really changed me. Not only the journal, of course, various things like I started to do sports, and I feel like every single person who's active, they would never damage your mental health, but it only benefits it as well.
And my aunt, can I actually ask, why did you break up with your partner during the pandemic?
We were just at the different life stages. I thought that I wanted to have a family, having kids, and I felt the social pressure. I was 27, 28. Now I am actually 5 years older, and I don't feel that pressure anymore because that's the society expectations. You put it all in your head. And then, of course, my younger sister, she got engaged. So I felt even more the pressure. Some of your friends getting married. But again, looking back, I'm so grateful that we're not together. We were not a good match. Now I can see that for sure for various reasons. But now I'm much more independent and healthy in a way that I know how to be happy with myself. And I didn't know how to be happy on my own before because I was jumping from a relation to a relationship. And again, from the way of upbringing, your parents did everything together. And they would never tell you, you need to be happy on your own. But that's what I realized. You need to be happy on your own in order to make others happy. It's like you need to love yourself first before you can love others.
Man, you definitely exude a lot of positivity, but I'm also really curious because you moved so much. And as you know, I also did my fair share of moving over the past few years. And for me, eventually I got tired of all that moving. I felt like I didn't have a home anymore. And on one hand, it was like really exciting, but on the other hand, I also found it quite challenging. And so I'm actually super curious to hear from you what your experience with that has been like. How has it shaped you, all these different cultural experiences?
Yeah. Having lived in Hong Kong, I thought when I moved to Munich, that was it. I'm gonna be close to my family. This is my last location. Maybe I'll find like a partner. I will settle down and be closer to Prague, and that's it. But suddenly I realized it's not about where you are, but it's about your mindset, how you set it up for yourself. Right now, I consider Dubai as a new home, but Prague will be almost my hometown that I grew up. But I also look forward to visiting all the places I have lived. Yes, it can be difficult. I also had imposter syndrome when I moved here. You always doubt yourself. I don't know if others do, but I highly do.
I think definitely.
I am like, oh, am I good enough for the job? What if they would find out that I'm not good enough, right?
Now, how do you deal with that imposter syndrome?
Good question. I try to be present all the time, so not to overthink. I even wrote it on my own hand. Be here now. I stick it into my office. So each time I see it, I breathe. Be here right now. And I actually realize myself, you don't have any problems right now when you think about it. You don't. Even at my home right now at the door, there's be here now. It's so simple, but it works sometimes, right? And I wanted to say that it can be difficult because you start from the scratch. And the older you are, more difficult you make friends. However, if I want to, I can connect and I can socialize. But I think your true friends, you only have a few in your life. I have, one of my best friends. I have a really good friend that I met in Munich, very close friend from university, and the one who I grew up with, for example, right now. But they are spread out. That's one of the disadvantages that you don't have all your friends in one place. But the advantage is whenever you travel, you have all the friends there. I will admit sometimes it can be quite challenging. Of course, I'm fine. I've been away for 10 years. But I know somehow here I already have some good colleagues that I can call actually friends. But it's not the same connection that you've had when you grew up with some old friends and you call them best friend. Sometimes in life, you can get distracted, and it's okay to acknowledge it and to embrace that feeling that sometimes you might be sad, but then you put back on your focus and then you continue again why you are actually here. The reason I'm saying it because one of my friends shared a reel of a tennis player. Tennis is like that. It's a constant battle with your mind. Sometimes you can get distracted. It's okay, but then you need to keep your focus because in tennis, if you don't focus, you lose immediately. You don't hit properly. But suddenly when you really focus, it hits different.
Definitely. I actually played tennis for 4 years or so when I was younger.
Oh my gosh, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, definitely. It is a mental thing. I mean, it is one thing to have technique, but what I noticed playing during games is that it's very much a game of patience and self control as well. I have seen people, if you had looked at the points, it looked like they were losing, but when things get tense, the calmer person tends to catch up and win. It is very much a mental game. So I definitely understand what you mean by that. But I'm also curious, Mai, which of the many places you've lived in has left the deepest impression on you?
I always ask this question to people that have lived in various places. But I know it's such a difficult one because every single place is so unique in a way. Let's say Bangkok was one of the locations that I have lived abroad in Asia. Hong Kong is very dear to me. I think I've learned a lot. At some point, I felt like I was having a depression in Hong Kong, but I've started my positivity journey, gratitude journey as well. And then I moved to Munich, where it was great to live close to my parents and friends, so I could visit them as well. Grateful for that experience. But then Kuala Lumpur was, again, one of the most beautiful experiences in a way that I felt mentally and physically really strong. And people are so nice in Malaysia, very welcome, very friendly, and their level of English is really good. So you could easily connect with them more than in Thailand. So I had a really good social life in Kuala Lumpur. And now in Dubai, I have really great workplace, supportive, positive. So that's where I am right now.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge in terms of you working yourself up to the role of like a director of rooms and leader within the hotel group? What would you say has been like the biggest challenge there?
I think the biggest challenge, not only in hospitality, but actually in life in general, is relationship. It's about how you actually build relationship, keep relationship with your colleagues, with clients, with guests, with suppliers. It all comes down to relationship, upwards and downwards, meaning to someone who's junior from trainee, to your peers, to your boss, to your team. It's always about relationship. And there's always different individuals on the team, and it's about how you actually adapt to them to make it work, how they adapt to you as well. Yeah, that's a big portion of that.
Mai Anh, what advice do you have for others that want to pursue a career in hospitality?
Think twice before you enter hospitality, because it's going to be a rough start, because hospitality, it is tough. But if you really enjoy being around people and making others happy, it's really rewarding. I think, it comes down to the advice that my dad told me: do good for others, but don't expect anything in return.
But how do you draw boundaries in a field like hospitality where it's expected of you to constantly give?
I think when you're young, you don't think about it. You don't put yourself first, because you constantly want to prove that you do a good job in order to get the next promotion. But as I mentioned, I took that sabbatical and I realized actually you could be going in minus in your bank account, but yet being very happy. So after sabbatical, I actually realized that you also need to put yourself first, because no one will take care of you but you. There will be always work waiting for you, but you sometimes needs to make a cut and say, no, make plans outside of work, because life is just not work. You need to have a life outside as well. I right now started to put myself first as well. And career is important, but that's not all. That's not what defines you.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Be present, don't overthink, don't chase the future, and be grateful for what you have.
What makes you say that?
Because that's exactly what I've been through the past years. And I realized that's how you become happy. If you're grateful, you are happy. And if I'm happy, I can make the others happy and they can feel my energy as well. Think about it. What's your purpose? And purpose is something that would always be linked to serving the others in a way. I have a friend that I met in Kuala Lumpur, and he was saying, my purpose is to inspire people having a healthier lifestyle, because I believe it can make them happier. Something so simple, but it's true. He was a personal trainer and nutritionist or something. Another was a very successful businessman. He was, I wanted to make sure I give back to the communities. So he was giving a lot to charities. He wanted to make sure he earns good money to give back to community. Yeah.
Mai Anh, thank you so much for taking part in the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for the time.
And as always, if you're a listener and enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could take the time to rate this podcast or write a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Thank you.